Benjamin Scott came home angry that day. A terrible day at the office, stress eating him alive. He pushed through his front door unannounced, ready to collapse into the silence that had swallowed his house for 8 months. But then he heard it. Laughter. His son's laughter. His heart stopped. Rick, Nick, and Mick hadn't laughed since their mother died. Not once. He stood frozen, chasing the sound like a man who'd just heard a ghost. When he opened the door to the sunroom, what he saw shattered him. The day had been brutal. Benjamin Scott sat through meetings in Manhattan that tore him apart. A failed launch. Investors pulling out. His board questioning everything he'd built. By 4 o'clock, he couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed his briefcase and left without a word. The drive to Greenwich felt longer than usual. His hands gripped the wheel too tight. His mind wouldn't stop racing. Anger sat heavy in his chest at work, at life, at God, for taking Amanda and leaving him with 3 sons he didn't know how to reach anymore. When he pulled into the driveway, he felt nothing, just exhaustion. He walked through the front door, loosening his tie, expecting what he always found: silence. The kind that reminded him every single day that his wife was gone and his boys had stopped being children. But today, something was different. He heard laughter. Real, uncontrollable, belly-deep laughter that made his breath catch. Benjamin froze. His sons, Rick, Nick, and Mick, laughing. They hadn't laughed in 8 months. Not since Amanda died. Not since that night a drunk driver took her while she was getting medicine for them. They'd become ghosts in their own home, too scared to make noise, too broken to remember what joy felt like. But right now, they were laughing. Benjamin's briefcase hit the floor. He moved through the house, following the sound, his heart pounding so hard it hurt. Down the hall, toward the sunroom, the place Amanda used to love. He pushed the door open. And what he saw stopped everything. Jane Morrison, the woman his mother-in-law had hired a month ago, was on her hands and knees on the floor. His 3 sons were on her back, faces glowing with joy he thought was gone forever. Mick held a rope around her neck like reins. Jane was neighing like a horse, tossing her head, laughing with them like she'd forgotten the world existed. Benjamin couldn't move, couldn't breathe. His sons, the ones who woke up screaming, who barely spoke, who asked every day when Mommy was coming home, were playing, actually playing. And it wasn't with him, it was with her, a woman he barely knew. She'd done what he couldn't, what all his money and desperation couldn't do. She'd brought them back. The anger from his day melted into something else. Relief, shame, gratitude so painful it felt like his chest was caving in. Then Jane looked up. Her eyes met his. The laughter died. Fear flashed across her face. She froze. The boys went quiet. They slid off her back and pressed close to her, like they were protecting something fragile. Benjamin stood in the doorway, unable to speak. His throat was too tight, his vision blurred. Jane opened her mouth, but nothing came out. He should have said something, should have done something, but all he could do was stare at this woman who'd just given his sons back their lives. He gave a small nod. Then he turned and walked away before the tears came. He didn't understand what had just happened, didn't know if it was okay to feel this grateful to someone who was supposed to just work for him. But one thing was clear. For the first time since Amanda died, his sons were laughing. And maybe God had sent Jane Morrison for a reason. Before we begin, like, subscribe, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Sometimes, God places people in our lives exactly when we need them most. That night, Benjamin didn't sleep. He sat in his office with the lights off, staring at nothing. The image wouldn't leave his mind. Jane on the floor, his sons laughing. That sound, God. That sound kept playing over and over until he thought he'd lose his mind. He kept asking himself the same question. How did she do it? He'd tried everything. After Amanda died, he read every book on childhood grief he could find. He hired Dr. Patricia Chen, the best child psychologist in Connecticut. She came twice a week with her calm voice and her carefully chosen words, sitting cross-legged on the floor with Rick, Nick, and Mick, trying to get them to talk about their feelings. It didn't work. He'd bought them new toys, thinking maybe distraction would help. He'd rearranged their schedules, created routines, made sure they ate healthy meals and got outside every day. He did everything the experts told him to do. Nothing worked. The boys just got quieter, smaller, like they were disappearing right in front of him. And then Jane Morrison showed up. Benjamin leaned back in his chair, rubbing his face with both hands. He didn't even remember hiring her. His mother-in-law, Patricia, had called him one afternoon while he was in the middle of an acquisition meeting. She said the fourth nanny had quit, something about the atmosphere being too heavy, and that she'd found someone new, someone different. Benjamin had barely listened. He'd just said yes and gone back to his meeting. That was a month ago. Now, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Who was she? Where did she come from? What made her different from everyone else who'd tried and failed to reach his sons? He pulled out his phone and opened the file Patricia had sent him. Jane's application. He'd never actually read it. 27 years old. References from a family in Boston. No college degree. A handwritten note at the bottom that said, "I understand grief. I won't run from it." Benjamin stared at those words for a long time. Most people ran from grief. He knew that now. They didn't know what to say, so they said nothing. They didn't know how to help, so they stayed away. Even his closest friends had stopped calling after the funeral. It was easier for everyone to just pretend the Scotts were fine and moving on. But Jane hadn't run. She'd walked straight into the heaviest house in Greenwich and somehow made it feel light again. The next morning, Benjamin came downstairs earlier than usual. He told himself it was because he had an early call with Tokyo, but that wasn't true. He wanted to see her. Jane was already in the kitchen, moving quietly, making breakfast. She didn't hear him at first. He stood in the doorway, watching. She wasn't doing anything special, just scrambling eggs, pouring orange juice. But the way she moved, calm, steady, present, it was like she belonged there. The boys came running in, still in their pajamas. Mick saw her first and smiled. Actually smiled. "Jane, Jane, can we play horse again today?" Benjamin's chest tightened. Jane glanced up and saw him standing there. Her smile faltered, just for a second, like she wasn't sure if she was still in trouble. "Good morning, Mr. Scott," she said quietly. "Benjamin," he corrected. His voice came out rougher than he meant. "Just Benjamin." She nodded, turning back to the stove. Rick tugged on her shirt. "Jane, can we? Can we what, sweetheart? Play horse? Like yesterday?" Jane hesitated, her eyes flicking toward Benjamin. He should have said no. Should have reminded them that Jane had work to do. That playtime wasn't part of her job description. But he didn't. "After breakfast," he heard himself say. 3 pairs of eyes turned to him, his sons, shocked that he'd said yes, and Jane, surprised that he wasn't angry. "After breakfast," Jane repeated softly, smiling at the boys. "Now, sit down and eat." They obeyed without argument. Benjamin poured himself coffee and sat at the far end of the table, watching. The boys talked to Jane while they ate. Not full conversations, they still weren't ready for that, but small things. Mick told her about a dream he had. Nick asked if she liked dinosaurs. Rick just sat close to her, like being near her was enough. And Jane listened, really listened, like every word mattered. Benjamin realized something that made his throat tight. She wasn't just good with them, she loved them, and they loved her back. For the first time in 8 months, Benjamin felt something he thought was gone forever. Hope. Benjamin started coming home earlier. He told himself it was because work was slowing down. That wasn't true. The truth was harder to admit. He wanted to see them, wanted to hear his sons laugh again, wanted to watch Jane somehow breathe life back into a house that had felt dead for so long. Most days, he'd find them in the playroom or out in the yard. Jane would be sitting on the grass with all 3 boys, reading to them or helping them build something with blocks. She never made a big deal out of it, never performed for him. She just loved them quietly, naturally, like it was the easiest thing in the world. Benjamin would watch from the window upstairs, careful not to interrupt. The house still carried Amanda everywhere. Her paintings hung on the walls, bright, colorful abstracts she'd worked on late at night when she couldn't sleep. Her coffee mug sat in the cabinet, unwashed, exactly where she'd left it that last morning. Her handwriting was still on the grocery list, stuck to the fridge. Milk, eggs, blueberries. Don't forget Mick's medicine. He couldn't bring himself to erase it. At night, after Jane put the boys to bed, Benjamin would walk through the rooms like he was searching for something he'd lost. Sometimes, he'd stop at the master bedroom door but couldn't go in. The bed was still made, the way Amanda had left it. Her pillow still had the dent from her head. Her book was still on the nightstand, bookmark halfway through. Changing anything felt like erasing her. so he slept in his office instead. On the couch, surrounded by work he didn't care about. It was almost midnight when he found Jane in the library. He hadn't meant to. He'd just been wandering again, unable to sleep, when he saw the soft glow of the reading lamp. She was curled up in the corner of the leather couch, barefoot, a book open in her lap. She looked peaceful, like the weight of the house didn't touch her the way it touched him. Benjamin cleared his throat softly. Jane looked up, not startled, just calm. Couldn't sleep either. He shook his head and stepped further into the room. For a moment, he just stood there, unsure what to do. Then he sat down across from her, not close, but not far. The silence between them felt different than the silence everywhere else in the house. It didn't press down on him, it just existed. "What are you reading?" he asked. She held up the book. "Beloved" by Toni Morrison. "Heavy reading for bedtime," he said. "Heavy thoughts need heavy books," she replied simply. Benjamin almost smiled. Almost. They sat in the quiet for a while. He didn't know what to say, didn't know how to thank her for what she'd done, didn't know how to ask her to keep doing it without sounding desperate. Finally, he spoke. "They laughed yesterday. Really laughed. I haven't heard that sound since." He couldn't finish. "Since Amanda," Jane said softly. Hearing his wife's name out loud felt like a punch to the chest. Most people avoided saying it, like saying her name would break him, but Jane didn't look away. "They talk about her," Jane said. "The boys. They tell me stories." Benjamin's throat tightened. "What do they say?" "That she smelled like flowers, that she sang off-key in the car, that she let them eat dessert first on Tuesdays." Tears burned behind his eyes. Those were details he'd forgotten, small things that used to make him laugh, things that felt lost forever, until now. "Thank you," he whispered, "for remembering her through them." Jane closed her book and stood. "Good night, Benjamin." She left the room quietly, and he sat there alone, feeling less empty than he had in months. Maybe she wasn't just helping his sons heal. Maybe she was helping him too. 3 weeks passed. Benjamin found himself looking for reasons to be home. He'd finish calls early, skip dinners with investors, make excuses to his assistant about why he couldn't stay late. The truth was simple. His house didn't feel like a tomb anymore. Tonight, he came home around 8. The boys were already asleep. He could hear the soft hum of the dishwasher running in the kitchen. Everything felt normal, calm. Then he heard it, crying, soft, broken. The kind of crying someone does when they think no one's listening. Benjamin's chest tightened. He moved quietly toward the kitchen and stopped in the doorway. Jane sat alone at the table, her back to him. Her shoulders shook. In her hands, she held something small, a silver locket, open, catching the light. She didn't hear him. She was too lost in whatever pain had her by the throat. Benjamin didn't move, didn't speak, just watched as this woman, who'd been so strong, so steady for his sons, fell apart in his kitchen. Finally, she sensed him. Her head turned. When she saw him standing there, her eyes went wide. She wiped her face quickly, trying to pull herself together. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking. "I didn't mean to. I'll just—" "Who's in the locket?" Benjamin asked quietly. Jane froze. Her fingers tightened around the silver chain. For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then, so softly, he almost didn't hear it, she whispered. Her name was Hope. Benjamin stepped into the kitchen and sat down across from her. Jane's face crumpled. Fresh tears spilled over. She died 2 years ago. Leukemia. She was 3 years old. The words hung in the air like smoke. Benjamin felt something crack open inside his chest. "Jane, she was my daughter," Jane continued, her voice shaking. "My baby girl. We fought for a year, hospitals, treatments, watching her get sicker, watching her lose her hair, watching her stop being a little girl and become someone I didn't recognize." Her hands trembled as she opened the locket wider, showing him the tiny photo inside. A little girl with gap teeth and bright eyes, holding a dandelion. "My husband blamed me," Jane said. "Said I should have noticed the symptoms sooner, should have pushed the doctors harder, should have done something, anything, to save her. The marriage didn't survive it. He took everything in the divorce, all her photos, her toys, her clothes. This locket is all I have left." Benjamin's throat closed. He couldn't speak. "I became a nanny because," Jane's voice broke completely. Because I don't know how to live in a world without children's laughter. It's the only thing that makes the quiet bearable. When I heard about your boys, about what they'd lost, I thought maybe I could help them in ways I couldn't help my own daughter. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry. I know this isn't professional. I know I shouldn't. You're not just helping them heal, Benjamin interrupted, his own voice rough. You're healing yourself. Jane shook her head. I don't think I'll ever heal. Maybe not, Benjamin said. But loving my sons, it's keeping you alive. The same way you're keeping them alive. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. Her fingers were cold, trembling. They sat like that for a long time. Two people drowning in grief, holding on to each other in the dark. Does it get easier? Jane whispered. The missing? Benjamin thought about Amanda. About the hole she'd left. About how every morning he still reached for her side of the bed and found it empty. No, he said honestly, but the missing becomes different. It becomes part of you. A presence instead of an absence. Jane nodded, tears still falling. She closed the locket slowly, pressed it against her heart. Thank you, she whispered, for not looking away. Thank you, Benjamin said, for showing up. And in that moment, something shifted between them. They weren't employer and employee anymore. They were two broken people who'd found each other in the ruins. Maybe that's what grace looked like. Mother's Day came like a shadow Benjamin had been trying to outrun. He woke up that morning with his chest already tight. Last year, Amanda had been alive. The boys had made her cards with crayon scribbles and sticky handprints. She'd cried happy tears and stuck them on the fridge where they stayed for months. This year, the fridge was empty. Benjamin had planned to take the boys to the cemetery, say a few words, come home, survive the day. That was all he needed to do, just survive it. But when he came downstairs, he heard voices in the playroom. He walked to the doorway and stopped. Jane sat on the floor with Rick, Nick, and Mick, surrounded by construction paper, crayons, and glue sticks. They were making cards. Benjamin's heart sank and swelled at the same time. She was helping them make something for Amanda. Of course she was. She understood what today meant. He stepped closer, watching quietly. Mick held up his drawing first, a stick figure with dark skin and a big smile, surrounded by hearts. In crooked crayon letters, for Jane, you make us smile. Benjamin's breath caught. Rick's card said, I love you, Jane, with 3 stick figures holding her hand. Nick's was messier, but clear, a woman on her hands and knees with boys on her back. They weren't making cards for their mother. They were making them for Jane. Something twisted in Benjamin's chest. Not anger, something deeper, something that felt like loss and relief all tangled together. Jane looked up and saw him standing there. Her face went pale. She stood quickly, almost knocking over the glue. I didn't ask them to do this, she said, her voice shaking. I swear. I told them we should make cards for their mother, Benjamin finished, his voice tight. Yes, Jane's eyes filled with tears. But they, Nick interrupted, holding up another card. This one had angel wings and flowers. We miss you, Mummy. Benjamin felt the air leave his lungs. They hadn't forgotten Amanda. They'd just made room for someone else. Mick tugged on Benjamin's sleeve. Can Jane come with us? To see Mummy? Benjamin looked at Jane. She was already shaking her head, backing away. No, I shouldn't, that's private. That's for your family. You are family, Mick said simply. The words hung in the air. Benjamin didn't know what to say. Taking Jane to Amanda's grave felt wrong, like crossing a line he couldn't uncross, like betraying something sacred. But his sons were looking at him with those wide, hopeful eyes. And Jane was standing there, terrified she'd ruined everything. If she wants to come, Benjamin heard himself say, she can. Jane's eyes went wide. Benjamin, are you sure? No, he wasn't sure. But he nodded anyway. An hour later, they stood together at Amanda's grave, Benjamin, Jane, and 3 little boys who didn't understand why love had to be complicated. The boys placed their angel card on the headstone. Then they stepped back, quiet. Mick reached for Jane's hand and pulled her forward. Tell Mummy you're nice, he whispered. Jane knelt at the grave, tears streaming down her face. I hope you don't mind that I love them, she said softly. I'm not trying to replace you. I couldn't help it. Benjamin stood behind her, his throat too tight to speak. Rick whispered to the headstone. "Mommy, Jane makes good pancakes, and she plays with us, and she doesn't get sad when we talk about you." That last line broke something in Benjamin. He'd been the one getting sad, the one pulling away, the one making his sons feel like loving someone new meant forgetting their mother. Jane stood, wiping her eyes. She met Benjamin's gaze, and something passed between them. Understanding, forgiveness, permission to keep living. 2 months after that day at the cemetery, Benjamin went to a charity gala at the Greenwich Country Club. He didn't want to go. He'd been avoiding these events since Amanda died. But his mother-in-law, Patricia, was on the planning committee, and she'd insisted, "You can't hide forever, Benjamin. People want to see you." So he went. The room was full of familiar faces, people who'd known Amanda, people who'd sent flowers after the funeral and then never called again. They smiled at him now, polite and distant, like he was something fragile they didn't know how to touch. Harrison Blake, a fellow tech CEO, approached with his wife, Vanessa. "Benjamin, good to see you out," Harrison said, shaking his hand. "How are the boys?" "Better," Benjamin said. "Much better, actually." Vanessa smiled, but there was something sharp behind it. "Yes, I heard you found wonderful help. What's her name again?" Warning bells went off in Benjamin's head. "Jane Morrison," he said carefully. "And she's been quite devoted to the children, from what I hear," Vanessa continued, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "She's excellent at her job." Vanessa exchanged a look with Harrison. "Of course, I just think it's wonderful that she's so involved. Some might say unusually involved for household staff." Benjamin's jaw tightened. "I'm not sure what you're implying." "Nothing." Vanessa touched his arm. "Just that people talk. There was a photo of you all at the farmer's market last week, the boys holding her hands, you pushing the cart. It looked very domestic. We were buying groceries." "Of course," Vanessa said, "but you know how people are. A young woman, a widower, 3 impressionable children." She trailed off meaningfully. Harrison cleared his throat. "What Vanessa means is, maybe consider the optics. For the boys' sake." Benjamin's voice went cold. "The boys are happy for the first time in 8 months. That's the only optic I care about." He walked away, his hands shaking. But over the next week, the whispers grew louder. Someone wrote a blind item in the local society column. "Which widowed tech titan is getting too comfortable with the help?" A photo appeared online, Jane and the boys at the playground, laughing. The caption read, "Nanny," or something more. Then the call came from Brookfield Academy, the private preschool where he'd enrolled Rick, Nick, and Mick for the fall. The headmaster's voice was apologetic, but firm. "Given the recent attention, and considering the sensitivity of our other family's concerns, perhaps it's best if the boys start next semester instead." Benjamin gripped the phone. "You're rejecting my sons because of gossip. We're protecting all our students from unnecessary scrutiny. My children are being punished for having someone who loves them? Mr. Scott, please understand." Benjamin hung up. His chest felt like it was caving in. Not because of the school. He could find another school, but because he knew what this meant. Jane would hear about this. She'd see the articles. She'd know she was the reason his sons were being rejected. And she'd leave. He drove home faster than he should have, his mind racing. When he got there, he went straight to Jane's room in the guest cottage. The door was open, and she was packing. Her suitcase lay open on the bed, half filled with clothes. She moved mechanically, folding shirts, placing them inside. Benjamin stood in the doorway, frozen. "Jane." She turned. Her eyes were red. "I can't stay," she said quietly. "I've become the problem." "Don't." Benjamin's voice came out rough, almost desperate. Jane kept folding clothes, her hands trembling. "I have to. Your sons were rejected from school because of me, because of gossip, because of people who don't matter. They matter to Rick, Nick, and Mick." Her voice cracked. "They're going to grow up hearing whispers. They're going to be punished because I forgot my place." "Your place?" Benjamin stepped into the room. "Your place is with my sons." Jane shook her head, tears falling onto the shirt in her hands. "I'm the maid, Benjamin. That's all I was supposed to be. You stopped being the maid the day my sons started laughing again. Then what am I?" She turned to face him, her eyes fierce and broken. "What am I supposed to be to them? To you?" Benjamin opened his mouth, but the words stuck in his throat. Jane let out a bitter laugh. You can't even say it, because the truth is, I'm black, I'm young, I'm staff, and people will always make assumptions. Your sons will pay the price their whole lives if I stay. Let them assume. I don't care what they think. You should care. Her voice rose. Rick, Nick, and Mick deserve better than being the center of scandal. They deserve better than what? Than someone who loves them? Than the only person who made this house feel like home again? The silence between them was electric. Jane sat down on the edge of the bed, her shoulders dropping. When Hope died, she whispered, I promised myself I'd never love another child, because losing her almost killed me. But your boys. She looked up at him, tears streaming. I couldn't help it, and now I have to leave before loving them destroys me. Benjamin knelt in front of her, his heart pounding so hard it hurt. What if you didn't have to leave? The scandal. What if I told the truth? Publicly. What if I made it clear you're not just staff? Jane's eyes searched his face. What truth? That you're essential. That my children need you. He stopped, swallowed hard. That I need you too. Her breath caught. Benjamin, not as a maid, not as a nanny, as someone who understands this grief. Someone who sits in the dark with me when I can't sleep. Someone who brought light back into a house that was dying. I'm not her, Jane whispered. I'll never be Amanda. I know, Benjamin's voice broke. And I'm not asking you to be. I'm just asking you to stay. Because when I think about you leaving, when I think about this house without you in it, I can't breathe. Jane covered her face with her hands, sobbing. Benjamin stayed on his knees, waiting, terrified she'd say no. Finally, she looked at him. If I stay, it can't be like this. I won't hide. I won't pretend to be less than I am. I don't want you to. Your world won't accept me. Then my world needs to change. Jane stared at him for a long moment, something shifting in her eyes. I'll stay, she said quietly, but not as your employee, as myself, all of myself. I wouldn't want it any other way. She stood, and he stood with her. For a moment, they just looked at each other, two broken people who'd found something fragile and real in the wreckage. Jane reached out and unpacked her suitcase, and Benjamin finally breathed. The week after Jane unpacked her suitcase, something shifted in Benjamin. He stopped hiding. He'd scheduled an interview with the Wall Street Journal weeks ago, standard publicity for a new product launch. His PR team had prepared talking points about cloud infrastructure and market expansion. Safe topics, corporate topics. But when the reporter arrived at his office, Benjamin had different plans. Diana Chen sat across from him, recorder running, asking the expected questions. Benjamin answered them automatically, his mind somewhere else. Then Diana paused, glancing at her notes. Mr. Scott, if I may shift gears, there's been some public interest in your personal life lately. Would you care to comment? His PR director, standing by the door, gave a sharp shake of his head. Don't engage. Benjamin ignored him. What specifically? He asked. Diana hesitated. The speculation about your relationship with your children's caregiver. The old Benjamin would have said, no comment, would have ended the interview right there. But sitting in that chair, he thought about Jane packing her suitcase, about his sons' faces when they thought she might leave, about Rick whispering to Amanda's grave that Jane didn't get sad when they talked about their mother. Yes, Benjamin said. I'd like to comment. Diana's eyebrows rose. Jane Morrison is the reason my sons are alive in the ways that matter, Benjamin said, his voice steady. After their mother died, they stopped talking, stopped playing, stopped being children. I hired specialists, therapists, tried everything money could buy. Nothing worked. And then Jane showed up. She didn't try to fix them. She just loved them. She got on her hands and knees and played horse. She read them stories. She sat with them through nightmares. She gave them permission to heal. Some have suggested the relationship is inappropriate, Diana said carefully. Benjamin's jaw tightened. Some people see a young black woman caring for 3 white children and automatically assume something improper. That says more about them than it does about her. So the relationship is strictly professional? Benjamin paused. This was the moment. Jane Morrison is family, he said. She's not their mother, no one could replace Amanda, but she's someone they love, someone they need, and I won't apologize for having her in our lives, even if it costs opportunities for your sons. Any institution that rejects my children for being loved by someone who doesn't fit their narrow definition of acceptable has no business raising them. The interview went live the next morning. By noon, it had gone viral. Half the internet praised his honesty, his defense against prejudice. The other half tore him apart, accused him of using his privilege, of romanticizing the help, of moving on too quickly. His board called an emergency meeting. Benjamin walked into the conference room to find 12 faces staring at him with concern. "The optics are problematic," his CFO began. "I don't care about optics," Benjamin said. "I care about my family. This could affect stock prices, then let them fall. I built this company. I'll run it my way, and I won't compromise my son's happiness for shareholders." The room went silent. That evening, Benjamin came home to find Jane in the kitchen, her laptop open, tears on her face. She was watching the interview. "You didn't have to do that," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, I did." He sat beside her. "Because every time I stay silent, someone else tells our story, and they get it wrong. Your board is angry. They'll survive. You could lose everything." "I've already lost everything that mattered once," Benjamin said quietly. "I won't lose it again, not without a fight." Jane looked at him, something shifting in her eyes, something that looked like wonder and fear and gratitude, all mixed together. She stood and stepped toward him. Then she did something she'd never done before. She hugged him. Not professionally, not carefully, fully. Like someone holding onto a lifeline. And Benjamin held her back, his eyes closing, feeling less alone than he had since Amanda died. Maybe this was what grace looked like. Two broken people choosing each other in the wreckage. 6 months passed. The whispers didn't stop completely, but they quieted. Some people came around, others didn't. Benjamin stopped caring which was which. What mattered was happening inside his home. Rick started speaking in full sentences again. Nick's smile came back, the real one, not the polite one he'd been using since the funeral. Mick stopped having nightmares every night. They called Jane Mama Jane now. It had started organically, their own compromise between honoring their mother and loving the woman who'd brought them back to life. Benjamin watched it all, grateful and terrified at the same time, because the truth he'd been avoiding had become impossible to ignore. He was falling in love with her, not because she'd saved his sons, not because she'd made his house feel like home again, but because of who she was when no one was watching. The way she hummed while cooking, the way she left books face down on every surface, the way she sat with him in the dark when neither of them could sleep, not saying anything, just being present. He'd spent weeks working on something in secret, something that kept him up at night, making calls, reviewing plans, meeting with architects and lawyers. Tonight, he was finally ready. He found Jane in the garden with the boys. They were planting flowers, Amanda's favorite peonies. The evening light made everything look golden. "Jane, can I show you something?" She looked up, dirt on her hands, a question in her eyes. He led her to the east wing of the estate, the section that had been closed off since Amanda died. She'd planned to turn it into something, but never got the chance. Benjamin opened the doors. Inside were blueprints spread across tables, architectural renderings on the walls, documents with official seals. Jane stepped in slowly, her eyes scanning everything. "What is this?" she whispered. "The Hope and Amanda Foundation," Benjamin said. "A residential care facility for families with children undergoing cancer treatment, medical support, grief counseling, play therapy. A place where families can heal together." Jane's hands flew to her mouth. Her daughter's name, Amanda's name, together. "You'd do this?" Tears spilled down her face. "I can't build it without you," Benjamin said quietly. "You know what these families need. You've lived it. This is your calling, Jane. But it doesn't have to take you away. It can happen here, with us." He handed her an envelope. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside were legal documents. Co-director of the foundation, equal partner, and beneath that guardianship, papers. "If anything happens to me," Benjamin said, his voice rough, "you're their legal guardian. You already are in every way that matters. This just makes it official." Jane couldn't speak. She just stared at the papers, tears streaming. "I'm not asking you to replace Amanda," Benjamin said. "I'm asking you to help me honor her, to turn our grief into something that saves others." Jane looked up at him, and something passed between them that felt bigger than words. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for me?" Benjamin stepped closer, his heart pounding. "Because you're not just important to my sons," he said. "You're important to me, and I don't want to imagine a life without you in it." The air between them shifted. Jane reached out and took his hand, and for the first time since Amanda died, Benjamin felt something other than grief. He felt hope. 6 months later, the Hope and Amanda Foundation opened its doors. Families came from all over the Northeast, parents with sick children, grandparents raising grandkids, siblings trying to hold each other together while cancer tore their worlds apart. The East Wing that had been empty for so long was now filled with life. With tears and laughter, and people learning how to survive the unsurvivable. The dedication ceremony was small. Benjamin had wanted it that way. Just donors, a few reporters, and the families who'd be staying there. He stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd. His prepared speech sat in his pocket, untouched. Instead, he found Jane standing in the back with Rick, Nick, and Mick. They were wearing matching outfits Amanda would have loved. The boys were smiling, really smiling. Benjamin cleared his throat. "I built my company by believing in systems," he began. "Data, control. I thought if I could just understand how things worked, I could solve any problem." He paused, his voice catching. "Then I lost my wife, and I learned that some things can't be solved. Some things can only be survived." The room was silent. I was failing at surviving. My sons were failing with me. We were drowning in a house full of everything except what we needed most. He looked directly at Jane. "Then someone showed up who taught me that healing doesn't come from fixing. It comes from presence, from staying, from loving people in their mess and not asking them to clean it up first." Jane's hand covered her mouth, tears streaming. "This foundation exists because 2 women believed that the only response to unbearable loss is unbearable love. My late wife Amanda, who taught me what it means to give everything, and Jane Morrison, who showed my sons and me that it's possible to live again." He motioned to her. "Jane, would you come up here?" She shook her head, but the boys pushed her forward gently. She walked to the stage, trembling. Benjamin pulled out an envelope. "This makes you co-director of this foundation and legal co-guardian of my children." Jane's knees nearly buckled. "Benjamin, you already are," he said quietly, "just for her. This just makes it official." Rick, Nick, and Mick ran onto the stage, wrapping themselves around her legs. She dropped to her knees, pulling them close, sobbing. The crowd stood and applauded, but Benjamin barely heard it. He was watching his family. The one grief had destroyed, the one grace had rebuilt. That evening, after everyone left, Benjamin found them in the garden. The boys were playing, chasing each other around the flowers they'd planted months ago. Jane sat on Amanda's bench, watching them with a soft smile. Benjamin joined her. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For letting me stay, for fighting for me, for building something beautiful out of all this pain." Benjamin looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd walked into his broken life and refused to run from the wreckage. "I think God sent you," he said simply. Jane turned to him, surprised. "I was angry at him for a long time," Benjamin continued. "For taking Amanda, for leaving me alone with 3 boys I didn't know how to reach. But then you showed up, and I realized maybe he didn't leave us alone at all. Maybe he just sent help in a way I didn't expect." Fresh tears slid down Jane's face. Mick ran over, breathless and laughing. "Papa, Mama Jane, come play with us." Mama Jane. The name didn't hurt anymore. It felt right. Benjamin stood and pulled Jane to her feet. Together, they joined the boys in the grass. And as the sun set over the garden where everything had changed, Benjamin understood something he'd been too broken to see before. Love doesn't end when someone dies. It just finds new ways to grow. Amanda had taught him how to love fully. Jane had taught him how to love again. And his sons, these 3 beautiful boys, had taught him that healing is possible, even when it feels impossible. The house that had been a tomb was alive again. Not because the grief was gone. It would never be completely gone. But because they'd learned to carry it together. And somehow, in the carrying, they'd found each other. Jane caught his eye and smiled. Not the careful, professional smile from when she first arrived, but a real one, full of hope and belonging. Benjamin smiled back. And for the first time in over a year, he wasn't just surviving. He was living. Because sometimes, when everything falls apart, God puts the pieces back together in ways you never imagined. Not to erase what was lost, but to show you that love is bigger than grief. That presence is more powerful than perfection. And that family isn't just who you're born to. It's who stays when the world goes dark. It's who brings the light back.